Good afternoon, I've been to lecturers and all my fellow friends, and today I'm going to present my research oral presentation, which is based on the use of SV board game in helping pupils to improve their descriptive vocabulary in spoken language. And the SV board game here refers to speaking vocabulary board game. So first, I would like to talk about Chapter 1, Introduction. So first of all, overview. So according to Wendy, as cited in Sorbonne 2016, she talks about in Malaysia, there are still many students which face problems in using English to communicate with other people, even though they have received their English education start from their primary year 1 continue till secondary school. And also, according to Erdogan 2017, the ultimate goal of studying for a majority of learners is to be able to communicate in a new language. So here we can see that even though they have received the English education start from year 1, they are still being not able to use it. So it is considered a failure in Malaysia education. And also, according to David, it talks about without grammar, very little can be conveyed, and without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. Here, in this context, students should be able to acquire an adequate number of words and should be able to know how to use it in a context. And also, it is believed that the inability of Malaysian ESL students in communicating using English is due to the lacking of vocabulary in their spoken language, which lead them to be not able to speak using the language. And also, according to Watts, traditional approach is believed to be the main problem of the factors that contribute to this kind of problem. And also, it tends to rely on the learner's memorization rather than personal connection or active involvement with the words, which means that they are able to understand the words. They know the meaning of the words, but they cannot use it in their communication because they are not familiar on the usage of the words. And also, it shows the lack of example and activities provide for them to practice and conceptualize the use of the words. Next one will be students are unable to have a vocabulary bank that store words from which they can select in expressing what they want to when they want to express naturally. So from here we can know that even though they have a vocabulary bank in their head, but they are still unable to use it in their daily communication. And another problem of this traditional approach of teaching vocabulary, as mentioned by Wulan Jani, was that it is quite boring because it only rely on the students' memorization, which asking them to copy, to remember the spelling and remember the meaning of the words, but not an activity that can like boosting them to participate in the conversation in the classroom. So it shows no fun, which student will tend to feel that is a boring lesson, which they will refuse to learn it. So the next one will be 1.2 context. So in my previous practicum, I've actually went to a Chinese school situated in Cheras, and I'm assigned to teach 2 classes of year 4, in which 4C will be a class which is average proficiency. They are able to understand my instruction. They are able to utter some sentences in English, but when it comes to oral responses, when I ask them to describe a situation or describe an event to me, they are struggling in finding words to express themselves. And for 4H, it is a class which is below average proficiency, which they are actually feel hard to understand what I'm talking about. They face difficulties in following my instruction because, according to them, the teachers always use Chinese, which is their mother tongue, in their medium of instruction, which causes them to have low coverage of the English language, which make them to be familiar, to get used with the language, which when I am using English to teach them, they feel difficult. And 1.3, the reflection of teaching and learning experience. So from my teaching and learning experience with my students during my speaking classes, I found out that actually they find difficulties where they are struggle in finding words to describe a situation or thing to me using the words they have learned, even though there are some words that they can use and they can be applied in their oral responses, but they tend to not using it in their oral responses. And as I asked them, it actually shows that they feel that their responses is telling me that they are not confident in using the words, even though they know they know the meaning of the words, they know to learn a new words, but the words is like an isolation word which doesn't have any meaning, which they only know the words with its meaning, but when it put in a context, it is meaningless, and that's why they feel embarrassed. They're scared to be embarrassed when if they use the words in a situation and they found it they use it wrongly, so they're scared to be embarrassed. Through my observation with my teachers at that school, I found that the teachers tend to use spelling tests and asking them to copy the meaning of the vocabulary inside their spelling tech exercise book for 5 times, and just focusing on the dictionary meaning. I found this way of teaching vocabulary, which is boring, causes them to be only tied to the meaning of the vocabulary, but not giving them an opportunity to practice the use of the words. And so here, the vocabulary instruction of teaching vocabulary in isolation tends to focus only on the teaching of dictionary definition. Hence, they often neglect the chances for the pupils to practice the use of the words in their daily communication. And that's why I'm trying to use games in order for them to give them more opportunity to practice the use of the words. And also it's because according to Kuzu and Euro findings as cited in Domus, when games and education are combined, it can be educative, and education environments can be entertaining. The learners who learn with the use of game can gain positive attitudes and can be more motivated while learning. And also according to Uberman, as cited in Direction Al-Maham 2015, learning and practicing vocabulary through games also provides students a stress-free opportunity to use the language. So 1.4, preliminary investigation. So the preliminary investigation that I will be carrying out will be interviews. So as interviews are useful in cases where there is need to obtain highly personalized data, as well as in cases where there are opportunities for probing to get underlying factors. So hence, I will carry out structured interviews with both teachers and students. So here, structured interviews. What is structured interviews? Structured interviews means that I will be listing out the questions that I will be asking the students and the teachers before the interview. And when I'm carrying out this interview, I will be using this list of interviews to ask them. So for this interview, the audio record, it will be audio recorded, as audio recording can be replayed repeatedly and record the whole interview without missing any parts. So I think that the interview as recorded in audio form, it can ensure a better analysis for the gist that are needed for my research. So these are the questions for interviews that I will be looking for. So basically for Appendix 1, which is about interview questions with the teachers, I will be talking about like how the teacher usually conduct a vocabulary lesson, and how a teacher usually conduct a speaking lesson, and how the students reply or react to this kind of way of teaching. And Appendix 2, so basically we'll be talking about how they view about their teacher's English lesson, and what is the ideal classroom, the ideal English lesson that they wish to participate in. So 1.4.2, anecdotal observation. So for this anecdotal observation, I'm going to use my anecdotal observation form to look into the way the teacher conducting a speaking lesson and the students' responses and participation. So for anecdotal observation, basically is about I will ask permission to the teachers to observe a lesson of hers teaching speaking lesson and vocabulary lesson, as to get some information about this kind of teachings where in the impact of these teaching ways to the students. So basically, I think anecdotal observation form will be looking like this. So there is a topic, objectives of the lesson, and the observation of the teacher's teaching, and observation of the students' responses, and some interpretation after based on the observation that I have written. And next one will be chapter 2, which is, so for selection of focus, I will be focusing on practicality, collaboration, and significance. So first of all, looking at the practicability of my research, it is actually totally practical in implement it in a lesson, because the game will only use the PowerPoint slide and some mission cards on the classroom, or some classroom object you can use it usually found in a classroom, and that's why it will be practical in implement it. Besides, it is also practical in terms of the time in designing it, as just one board game, you can just modify the content of the board game which you can actually tailor to the needs you want. For example, the syllables, the topic, the objective that you want to achieve. So it will be practical in terms of time and the material. And the next one will be collaboration. As games are advantageous in providing students a cooperative learning environment, it allows students to work together through friendly competition. So for this as board game, it will actually support the collaborative learning, which is the student will have to cooperate together in order to succeed in the game. So I will actually divide the students into groups. So they have to collaborate between each other in order to use the words correctly and then proceed to the next round. And here, through the process of discussion about how to use the words in real life, they will have to negotiate the functions, meaning, and the use of the words so that it is being used correctly and also it will improve the students' communicative skill. So the next one will be significance. By looking in the significance, the SV program is actually suitable for pupils at any level because pupils will usually love games. Hence, it will be totally useful in attract the students which are not interested in English subject lesson by using games. Because using games, they will feel like they are motivated to learn because they want to take part, they want to participate in the games. And then through the games, it's not totally meaningless, but getting them to learn something without the realization they are gaining something. And also, according to Ying, as cited in Wulajani 2016, also reported that students learn more quickly and retain the learning material better in a stress-free and comfortable environment. Also, according to Crash and Affective Filter hypothesis, when students feel motivated, their affective filter, which serve as the barrier of learning, will be low, which allow them to receive more input and they can understand a context or a concept better. And also, it for this board game is also aimed to fulfill one of the underlying pedagogical principle of the curriculum in this DSKP, which indicate the fun, meaningful, and purposeful learning. And the next one I'll be talking about, talking about action. So the model I have chosen will be Stephen Kami's model with 1982. And so in this model, each cycle and had 4 steps, which consists of plan, action, observe, and reflect. So at the planning stage, the researcher will have to specify the problem faced and plan a solution to help in solving the problem. And the second one, at the action stage, the researcher will carry out an action using the intervention plan. And the third one will be when the action is carried out, the researcher will observe, analyze, and interpret the responses collected during the action, along the action stage. So the last one will be reflection stage. And for here, the researcher will reflect on the observation made in order to make any modification or improvement on the intervention plan. And the next cycle will be continued with the revised plan. And the next chapter I'm going to talk about will be research objective and research question. So for the research objective, this research will be going to achieve the objective of to find out whether board game can help in improving students' descriptive vocabulary in spoken language and to explore the use of board game in improving students' descriptive vocabulary in spoken language. And the research questions will be to find out, does board game improve students' descriptive vocabulary in spoken language? And the second one, how does the use of board game help in improving students' descriptive vocabulary in spoken language? And so for chapter 4, research participant. In research participant, I'm going to use purposive in sampling to select my participants. I will select 3 participants of year 4 based on the pre-selected criteria relevant to my research questions. So I will select 3 students who always struggle in finding words in expressing themselves orally in English during my lesson. After I've selected my students, I will get a permission from the teacher, administrators by writing a letter to the administrator of the school. And then the personal information of my participant will be protected, in which their names, races, religions, and background will show nowhere in my research. So this will be my request letter. And the last chapter, chapter 5. And so for my action plan, as I've chosen Stephen Kami's model. So there will be 2 cycles conducted, and there are 4 steps in each cycle, which are plannings, actions, observations, and reflection. So during my planning stage, I will be identify in the problem of students in speaking vocabulary based on the interview with both teachers and pupils. And after this, I will try to come up with a way that caters to the students' interest for them to practice the use of the descriptive vocabulary learned in the lesson in real life communication. Just like the question I've shown just now, I will be asking students what an ideal speaking lesson that they feel they will be attracted to, they will be actively participate in, and they would like to take part in. So from here, I'm actually gathering some information about their interest, their learning style. So from here, I will start to plan a lesson, an intervention to be used in the speaking lesson in order for them to use it at ease. So here, I'm planning to use the SV board game, which they might feel interested in, to improve their descriptive vocabulary in spoken language. And the next one, action. So this is where I'm going to implement my intervention. Through the implement plan made in previous phase, which is using SV board game in my speaking lesson, I'll actually flash the board game on board, and I will divide my students into groups, and each group and individual will be given chances to roll the dice on SV board game as to give everyone a chance to use the words to try to construct a sentence using the words orally. And what they have to do is they will have to work together, collaborate within each other in order to complete the missions in the column of the board game as to proceed to them finally. And then they are given freedom to discuss with their peers while completing the mission. So when they are not able to complete the mission, they cannot proceed to the next column. It is to get them to be competitive and to have the motivation to use the words correctly in a context. And the next one will be observation. So along the implementation of my intervention, I will actually ask one of my practical mates to use the checklist I have prepared to have an observation by taking notes in the checklist form I have prepared in order to gather some information about the effectiveness, the use of the intervention to the student and their responses towards this intervention. So the checklist form will be like this. So I'm going to look at the aspect of significantly limited use of vocabulary compared to his peers in class, and has significantly more difficulty using and generalizing new vocabulary than his peers, and struggles to find words despite knowing them. For example, the use of I think, may, can more than his peers, and struggle to convey meaning when recounting stories even compared to his peer, and show frustration, reluctance when required to contribute or explain ideas. So the form will be from never to most of the time. So the observer will have to take according to the range that they think is most suitable. And when he or she has some comments on the lesson or on the intervention, the comments will be written in a column which is prepared for them to write. And the last one will be reflection. So from here, through the observation, the checklist I've gathered from the past phase. So I would then analyze, interpret the observation checklist collected, and then based on the data, I will make improvement and modification on my research in the next cycle. So the next cycle will continue with a revised plan. And 5.2, data collection procedure. So for pre-post test, it is also being used to look at a student's progress after a teaching and learning process. Hence, I will be using pre-post test to see the improvement before and after the intervention. So my pre-post test will be using pictures, which is getting students to describe a situation using their own language. So this test will be the same pre and the post. It is to see their responses, their changes in their spoken language before and after the intervention. Their responses will be audio recorded as well in order to serve as a documentation. So my pre-post test will be looking like this. And the 5.2.2 audio recording. So in my research, as I'm going to look at their spoken language, hence I'll be using audio recording to record their spoken language from time to time. So I will actually constantly record their audio after my speaking lesson. The questions will be just like what I showed before, like what did you learn just now, how did you feel, what was you find interesting. And this one is actually looking at the changes of their spoken language after the speaking lesson. This question will be like this. And the next one will be observation checklist. I will prepare a checklist to be used during an observation in my lesson. And just like I explained just now, I will ask my practical mate who understand how to use the checklist to be my observer during my speaking lesson by using the SV board game. And the checklist will contain the 5 items to be examined by the respondent while observing me, teaching them speaking lesson using the board game. And then the observation checklist is the same as shown just now. And the next one will be interview. So interview is a dialogue who is done by interviewer to get information from informant. So hence, the purpose of me doing interview is to get their usual way of conducting vocabulary and speaking lesson, and the students' opinion towards the teachers, speaking class, their lesson, their way of teaching, if they feel whether it's interested. Just like I've mentioned before, the finding of the interview will be recorded in audio form. So these are the interview questions. And then 5.3, which is data analysis procedure. So first of all, for pre-post test, I will analyze their oral responses during pre-test and post-test by making comparison between the audio recordings during pre-test and post-test. Is to look at the improvement of using the descriptive vocabulary in their daily communication, in describing the same pictures before and after the intervention. And then for audio recording, I'll transcribe their audio and analyze them specifically focusing on the use of the new words learned in answering my question, as to note their changes in words choosing in spoken language. And for observation, through the checklist, I'll evaluate their progression or improvement in using new words in their spoken language. For example, they're struggling, for instance, from most of the time, struggle in expressing themselves to moving towards never after implementing my SV board game. And the next one will be interview. So as my interview will be audio recorded, so I also interpret the audio on the interview by noting down their different use of the words during after every interview. And so for triangulation, for my study, my research question 1, does board game improve students' vocabulary in spoken language, will be answered from the checklist that I will be using for my observation. And research question 2, how does the use of board game help in improving students' vocabulary in spoken language, will be answered from my audio recording and interview. With this, I will triangulate my data to answer my research in my study. And the 5.5, implementation schedule. So first, the table 1 will be showing the implementation schedule, which I will start from conducting a pre-test, analyzing the result, and then will be intervention, session 1, which is the use of board game to give them chances to practice the use of the adjective in real life, through the observation checklist. And then session 2 will be the same. And the last one will be conducting a post-test, which is exactly the same test which is conducted in pre-test, is to see their progression, their effect, the impact of the intervention after the intervention. And table 2 will be showing the work schedule. So the work schedule will be start from the preliminary investigation, which I will be interviewing the students and teachers, and I will be observing a lesson conducted by the English teachers, and carry out the pre-test, and session 1 implement the intervention, and session 2 implement the modified intervention, and then carry out the post-test and gather and analyze the data. And the budget. As I have mentioned before, this game will be implemented using PPT, which is PowerPoint slide. So estimate budget for my study will be 94 ringgit, including photocopy paper, printer, ink, worksheet, and others. For me, the amount is still affordable. So that's all from me. Thank you.